So we've all been there. We go on a date and the guy who shows up just doesn't look like his photos. He wasn't exactly catfishing you or anything like that. He just looks nowhere near as hot as the photos led you to believe. So what do? Recently, I was in a weekend course with a guy named Sandy Robbins, who's been a leader in the personal development and self-help industry for over 40 years. He incidentally runs a theater company as well. And in the course, Sandy discussed the notion of beauty and how we as human beings have the capacity to generate an appreciation of beauty in all sorts of unexpected places. So I asked Sandy to come on my podcast and discuss this notion a bit more. And I also asked him whether this can apply to dating. So can we as human beings work on shifting our own standards of beauty so that we can be less superficial? Because let's be honest, in the age of Grindr and Instagram and other dating apps, this is a big issue. So here we go. So, Sandy, thank you so much for agreeing to appear on my Grindr Survivr podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. It's great to be here.
This is kind of interesting for me because you, as far as I know, you are the first straight man to ever appear on my Grindr podcast. So, congratulations.
We're a dwindling minority, huh?
But you've been running a theater company at the University of Delaware for 30 years. So if you don't know gay guys, I don't know who does.
It's fair to say.
God bless the arts, right? But obviously, for my viewers who might not know, last month I took a course with you on self-expression, and we did a lot of examination of listening and the power of listening and the way that we listen to other people. But there was a small part of the course that really jumped out at me. It struck my imagination and it kind of got me thinking. And it was, you might have to remind me about it, but it was about generating a sense of beauty. And I think at one point you asked us to go outside, take a short walk and look for things that occur to us as beautiful. Yeah, I'm probably getting it wrong. Kind of remember off the top of your head, kind of.
I do remember. It was an assignment during the break to, as you're on the break and getting coffee or whatever you might be doing, to take a moment and just stop and intentionally look for beauty around you. And the point of the exercise is, as I think you discovered, that when you are looking for beauty, there's plenty to find. But in the normal course of our lives, we don't always stop to see beauty. We don't always notice it. It doesn't mean it's not there. It's just that you and I are preoccupied a great deal of the time and miss what is otherwise just in front of our eyes.
And what jumped out at me about the course was all the kind of internal monologue, all the thoughts that popped into my head that said, well, that's not beautiful, or that's ugly, or look at that, that's stupid, or look at that over there. And I remember the first thing I saw a really expensive Mercedes, and I thought, ooh, that's beautiful. And I thought, well, wait, why is that beautiful? And it was like, where is this quote unquote standard of beauty coming from? And I think it's beautiful just because I know it's expensive. And that was just kind of occurred to me as ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's curious because, you and I and no one else ever, we don't recall having sat down and determined and designed what we're going to find to be beautiful. We sort of wind up with those standards, never having voted on them. And if we're not conscious about it, we just wind up thinking what's beautiful is whatever was once beautiful in our lives, rather than actually seeing if we could cultivate and develop and create a sense, you could call it a listening for beauty, an appetite for it. And in the creating of that appetite, could we expand the margins a little bit of what we wound up with thinking is beautiful and expand that and thereby have a more fulfilling life.
So before we kind of move forward on generating a sense of beauty, you made an interesting point about saying we don't get a vote in our standards of beauty. And I started wondering, well, where the heck did my own standards of beauty come from? And they're not necessarily nice places, are they?
No, they just kind of they just kind of wind up however they wind up. And we inherit it. It's just very much, you could say that about a lot of our lives. Certainly it's true about what turns us on sexually. I don't recall having decided that this sort of body would be a turn on and this sort of body would be a turn off. I never sat down and voted on that or designed it. And it's same with my taste in food and the same with my appreciation of the physical beauty of things. That just what you wind up being someone, and then we live our lives as if there are things that are beautiful and aren't beautiful, like a fact, having forgotten that that's entirely subjective. And more than just subjective, it's erratic. It is put together by accident.
To what extent can a human being really change their standards of beauty? Because on some level, I can look at a woman and think, oh, she's beautiful. But at the same time, I don't think I could, quote unquote, generate enough that I would find her sexually attractive. So there's the flip side is as I'm walking around, you're just kind of walking around in life, you can appreciate things in a new light. So I get the needle can be moved a little bit. I'm not sure how much. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I don't think the needle in some areas moves so well. They tried for about 50 years this thing called conversion therapy on gay people, and it wound up being nothing other than torture and cruelty. So there is some degree to which it is the way it is. But in the area of beauty, which isn't have anything to do with sexual desire, just beauty, I'm pretty committed that we can expand what we appreciate. And my basis for thinking that is my own experience, especially with music. I grew up listening to top 40 radio, which I still love. But at some point, in college, I took this music appreciation course. And the course was designed exactly for what we're talking about. It was designed to expand your sense of what was beautiful music. And in my case, it worked just by exposure and familiarity and some knowledge of what what other people had found exceptional and desirable and noteworthy about music. I wound up slowly appreciating music that had been outside of my sphere of what was beautiful for me. And my musical taste now is way more eclectic than it might have been had I not taken that course. Having the opportunity to notice things that are there that you are previously not noticing is part of the pathway to finding something beautiful that you previously didn't. The same thing has happened for me with painting and with sculpture. There's some things that just knock you out no matter what. You just notice them and you're knocked back. But if you can discover what it is about those things that's knocking you back, then you have more room to be knocked back by more things later.
Well, you said something interesting. I want to go back to. You said that's distinct from kind of physical attraction or sexual attraction or kind of quote unquote thinking someone's hot. And yet I'm kind of wondering, to what extent do you think, you and I have had a few conversations about this, but one of the things I explore in my book is I think if you're lucky enough to live in a kind of a Western city that has an open, for the most part, gay-friendly environment, like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, London, Berlin, you've got a lot of options, and people are just looking for the hottest thing they can find, and they just kind of jump from date to date to date, and that's using a euphemism. rather than looking for what can I appreciate in the person I'm talking to right now. So then I wanted to ask, and I don't know if maybe it can't, but I'd be curious to get your thoughts about taking the appreciation of beauty and then actually wondering, can we change what we find attractive, or what can we do to appreciate beauty in people we're with in the moment, even if they don't meet our perfect standards?
Yeah, well, I think we can distinguish and differentiate sexual attraction from beauty. I can't imagine that there's anyone who doesn't have a far greater range of what they find beautiful, what presses our buttons sexually. And I don't know that we have too much vote about what's sexually attractive to us. It seems to me like that we just wind up that way. Maybe getting older may be the one thing that influences it, because you wind up appreciating more different kinds of attractiveness as you get older. That's probably true. But short of that, I'm not thinking of it so much in the realm of sexual attraction as I am beauty, like we would apply to a painting or music or any of the arts. And I don't know if we can change what we find beautiful, but I'm quite certain we can expand what we find beautiful. I don't know that I can take something I find beautiful and no longer find it beautiful. But here's what seems to me to be the case, that this thing called beauty is, for the most part, we live as if it's located in the object we're looking at. But if we took the case, if we stood in the possibility that beauty isn't located in what I'm looking at, it's located in the way I'm looking. And by virtue of the way I look, by virtue of the opening I am in which something occurs, I can expand what I appreciate. I can expand what I find attractive. I can expand what calls to me. And that I'm quite sure is possible. I think it happens for all of us anyhow. I mean, you don't like the same music you liked 30 years ago, I'll bet. And I'll bet there are statues and paintings and theater works and dance forms that you might once have not liked that you now like, right?
Sure. For those who might not have ever taken one of your courses, when you say that you have to stand in the kind of the beauty is, it sounds like people have to get first, they have to get clear on it's their interpretation of what's beautiful. Is that what you're kind of saying? Or how it's occurring to them? It's very personal, but they have to get, it's not that person X is more beautiful than person Y. They have to understand that it's their perception.
Yeah, and I think that's not hard for most of us to get. There's that cliched quotation, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I think it's tough to argue with that, because if you and I both go to the museum and we both look at a statue, one of us can be moved to tears and the other of us could walk right past it thinking it's uninteresting. And we know that happens. We know that happens with people even who have similar upbringings and similar backgrounds. So it's not as if there are things out there that are beautiful for everyone, no matter what. It just isn't that way. And all the evidence tells us that, as you put it, the way we perceive has a very great deal to do with what shows up for us as beautiful and what doesn't. So once you can start with that realization, oh, I have something to do with what's beautiful in my life. It isn't just the stuff out there has something to do with it, but actually the way I'm perceiving, the way I'm looking, the set of standards and concerns and whatever else makes up the way I look, those things are influencing what I find beautiful every bit as much as the object itself or the person, him or herself. And once we get that, I don't think it's very hard to say, well, that's interesting. I wonder what are my standards of beauty? My standards of beauty are hidden from me. I don't have a list of them. I've never consciously looked and said, what do I find beautiful? And very few of us, if any, have done that. But I could do that. And I could start to get conscious about the filter, if you will, through which I'm looking at things. In the course that you took, part of our concern was just discovering that this thing called beauty is a function of the way we look rather than a function of what's there. And that discovery, which I don't think is a difficult one for people to make, whether they take a course or don't take a course, I think we can all get pretty clear that it is possible to appreciate beauty, to kind of stop the action, if you will, for a moment or two every once in a while, and just notice the sunset, or just notice a flower, or just notice the face of someone on the street, and allow ourselves to be moved by that, allow ourselves to be affected by it. One of the things that's, as far as I can tell, innately human is the capacity to be moved by beauty. I have a dog I love very much, but my dog never looks at a painting and is moved to tears, but I am.
So it wouldn't be a dating podcast if I didn't ask this question. So let's take a hypothetical, which has happened to many a time. Suppose you arrange to meet someone. You may have seen their pictures online. They show up. They're not as cute as the photo led you to believe they were, right? And so then you're in the position of like, because your reaction might be ick or yuck or I've been deceived or all sorts of things will jump into your head. But then what kind of struck me out of kind of doing that exercise is what, if anything, could I do to look and appreciate this person other than in a way that's other than just like, oh, he wasn't as hot as his photos?
Yeah, well, I think it has to do with two things. One, if my only purpose is to see if the reality can match the photograph, I'm probably going to be disappointed way more frequently than I am pleased, because I know I look at a lot of photographs of people in the theater, what we call headshots, and invariably the person in the headshot looks younger, thinner, more attractive than whoever walks into audition. That leaves me with a choice. And the choice I've got, the choice I think each of us has, is, do I want my relationship to be to the image of things, or do I want to develop a connection to what is actual, what's real, what's actually alive and available? And I know that if the only thing I do when an actor walks in the room to audition is compare him or her to that photograph and my expectation, two things are true. That one is that person has very little chance with me, very little chance to positively impress me. And the second thing is that I have very little opportunity to find what there is in that person to appreciate beyond the superficial and beyond the things that really aren't going to matter fundamentally. Just to take the chance of pulling this metaphor a little too taut, maybe. When an actor walks in an audition room, you've got, do they match my expectation? That happens, just as you said, automatically. I couldn't turn it off if I wanted to. There's an instant, oh, they do match my expectation. No, they don't. But if that's as far as it goes, I lose the opportunity to see, hey, this person has qualities that I hadn't seen as desirable for this production or this character. But wow, that could be really beneficial here. Hey, wait a minute. What else is over where that person is that was outside my expectations? maybe in conflict with my expectations, but that nonetheless could be pleasing, that could be difference making. And if you can get yourself to look beyond the disappointment that your expectation has been thwarted, you have the chance to discover some really terrific things. I know this, that I've gotten to be with a lot of people who have had love relationships, romantic sexual relationships that have lasted many years. In almost every case, well, not almost, in every case, something, what you fall in love with at first might be that person's appearance or the immediate, the superficial, the ways they match your expectation. But if the relationship's going to last, you're going to get attracted to aspects of that person that you didn't even know were there initially. And I think that has something to do with being willing to expand your capacity to appreciate beyond what's automatic.
Wow. So how does one look for, because I think the comparison between, an audition versus a date is perfect, right? I mean, I think that's great. So let's stick with it. How do you look for what other qualities might be there? Because you don't necessarily, whether it's an audition or a first date, people aren't going to give their entire life story. So how do you kind of be on the lookout for good qualities that you might not have even known you wanted or needed?
Well, I think the first thing is, if you can be responsible for, and I'll say what I mean by that in a moment, if you can be responsible for the automatic set of standards that you automatically apply in an instant without any malice, but also without any thought. When you were giving an example a few moments ago, you said, oh, that person's hot, that person's not hot. Well, if you can be responsible that you have that automatic reaction, the moment you recognize it as automatic, it loses its supremacy. It stops being the only way in which to apprehend something. But that doesn't happen unless you're someone who can say, wow, I've looked for myself and I've discovered that I have an automatic, mechanical initial response to everything and everyone. Now, you can test this out for yourself and your listeners can test it out. I'm pretty sure nobody's going to find an exception, that you and I, by the nature of the way human beings are put together, we have an automatic, instantaneous apprehension of people, of things, of situations. And once we recognize how automatic that is and how mechanical it is, we have the almost immediate reaction to noticing how automatic it is that it diminishes its supremacy. It diminishes how important it is. It stops being such a big deal to me that the first instant of response I had to somebody was, oh, she's a little overweight or he's a little too tall or whatever the hell it might be. And if I know that that is just a knee-jerk automatic thing, I don't have to get rid of it, but it stops being the only way I can apprehend that person. So that's the first step, and maybe the most important one.
Just to clarify, kind of to go back to, you said kind of in being responsible, we just kind of we're just going to have these random thoughts, opinions, and assessments. And they're, if we look hard enough, we didn't invent them and we certainly didn't sit down and create them. And so kind of just recognizing that process it'll have less power over us. Is that correct?
That's my experience with myself and with thousands of people I've been fortunate enough to be able to work with, is that to the degree you're responsible for what's automatic about you and what it just happens in a knee-jerk way, to the degree you're responsible for that, you're aware of that, you own that, so to speak, to that degree, you have now a capacity for something beyond it.
Fantastic. So, okay, so let's say I'm on a date. He doesn't look like the photos. My knee-jerk reaction is, not as hot as the photos. Then what? And I get like, okay, that's just me. I'm going to enjoy the next hour or 2 hours anyway. What's next?
I think if you're really there, open to enjoying what is there instead of reacting to what isn't there, your question kind of takes care of itself. If you and I are on a date, let's say, a blind date, we're meeting for the first time, or a hookup based on the internet or whatever, and my first thing is, oh, that guy doesn't look like his photo. Okay, well, I'm here anyway. So one possibility is to spend the rest of the time comparing you to a photo. That seems to have a limited value. But the other possibility is to find out, let's find out about that person and find out what has that person tick and what I might share in common with that person. I think just the availability to explore and discover beyond my first impression means that I'm now the kind of person for whom something extraordinary can happen. We think people get lucky and extraordinary things happen for them. Well, maybe extraordinary things happen for us when we've caused ourselves to be the kind of person for whom extraordinary things can happen. And part of that is being willing to be with someone beyond my first impressions. And I don't mean thinking positively. I don't mean that at all. I mean actually discovering, actually being open to, I'm with this person. What's this person about? What is this person passionate about? What do they care about? What might be our common points of interest? And if I'm open in that way, I'm very likely to find some things with almost any other person that make spending time together worthwhile. Doesn't mean that, we're going to wind up in a 50-year romance, but it could at least make the next couple of hours pretty enjoyable instead of, he didn't look like his picture.
Wow. Can you say a little bit more about, it's not about people who get lucky, but it's people who kind of bring a new mentality to it? I've done more than one of your courses, and it certainly feels like freaking luck. It certainly feels like you get lucky sometimes and sometimes you don't. It all feels like a crapshoot. So say more about, because it feels that way, but maybe, kind of say a bit more about that.
Look, you and I, in the course of our lives, circumstances do just happen. No question about it. I go outside and it's a thunderstorm one day, and another day I go outside and it's sunshine. So I'm not saying that there's some, in philosophy, they call it solipsism, where you're creating everything in reality and there's nothing out there at all. But the way circumstances occur for us, our experience of any set of circumstances, there's a range of ways that people can experience the exact same circumstances. The cliched example is that 10 people go to see a movie. One of them thinks it's boring. Another one thinks it's sad. Another one thinks it's funny, et cetera, et cetera. And they all watch the same movie. So is what's determining their experience the movie? Or is it something over where they are? And it's pretty tough for me not to wind up concluding that it has something to do, my experience of my life has more to do with me than it does with the circumstances. Because no matter how horrible circumstances may get for me, there is someone who in those same circumstances has a pretty high quality of life. That without a job and without income and whatever circumstances you and I might consider to be negative, there's somebody who's having a great life in those circumstances nonetheless. So there's a lot of evidence, if we open our eyes and open our hearts a little, to notice that, hey, wait a minute, we have something to do with how we experience our life. It's not just a matter of a crapshoot. And I think once you can appreciate that possibility, that how you're operating in life might have as much to do with the quality of your life as what happens, the moment that gets real for you, the moment you discover that for yourself, there's just an enormous opportunity to say, wait a second, all right, I have an automatic way I respond to things, but what else is possible beyond that automatic way of responding to things?
And that's how we discover the good or the hidden gems in people's personality or their experiences.
I think so. I think that a great many of us, if we have an initial knee jerk reaction, it's sort of like, a dog sees a roast and bites one bone and runs off with it, leaving the roast. And we could be like that in regard to our first reactions, that we run with our first reaction to something and it never gets beyond that. But if, on the other hand, we're willing to have our first reaction and not make such a big damn deal out of it, and we are still there. I've had this knee jerk reaction that you're not attractive or you don't look like your photo or whatever. Okay, I got that. That's there. Now I get curious. I get interested. One thing's for sure, if you're interested and willing to make yourself interested, then you can find something out that otherwise isn't available to you.
And by interested, you mean interested in the other person. Get interested in what they're doing, not the noise going on inside my own head.
Yeah, not whether they match the picture in my head, because very little in life matches my expectations. If my criteria for pleasure of any kind is, does it match the pictures in my head, very little in life is going to wind up being pleasing, I think.
Right. That's powerful. Okay. So to kind of bring it all together, we've got to get clear on, we didn't invent our own standards of beauty and sexual attractiveness. God knows where it comes from. We certainly didn't get a vote on it. However, in kind of recognizing that, we can expand our capacity to appreciate new things. And if on the date the guy doesn't look like his photos, get that's just a reaction and spend some time getting interested in what the other person's about and what they're bringing to the table. We might be pleasantly surprised. Does that sound like I'm just kind of summarizing it all?
Absolutely does. It absolutely does. Another way of saying what you said is that maybe my knee-jerk reactions, my immediate automatic reactions aren't so damn significant. If I go to the doctor's office, he takes one of those little rubber hammers and hits my knee and I kick, I don't think it's very significant that I kicked. I don't say, oh, I must be a violent person, I kicked. But I do tend to think that my instant automatic reactions to people and situations is significant. Well, maybe it's not so damn significant.
And by significant, you mean, because what it sounds like is people often, myself included, they'll think that instant judgment or instant assessment is God-given inspiration from heaven or the truth. They'll be like, oh, well, then I had that reaction, so a relationship can't be possible. Is that what you mean by significant?
Yeah, it's exactly what I mean. And if you're willing to relate to that immediate automatic reaction as an automatic, meaningless, arbitrary response that has nothing whatsoever to do with the person you're with or the work of art you're looking at, has nothing to do with it. It's just automatic programs from the past, you could say. And the minute you're willing to be responsible for it and relate to it that way, now there's an open space. There's some new opening in which you can look over there and say, well, what is there? Who is this I'm with? And I'm with it. The irony for me is I'm there anyway. I might as well get curious and open. It's not as if I'm not there. I'm actually there with that person. And since I'm there, why not be open to what could be extraordinary about that person instead of just gathering more evidence for my first impression?
Wow. Okay. That's powerful. Yeah, you're right. I've been on many a date where I'm sitting there thinking, oh, good God, when do I get to leave? As opposed to, well, what's interesting about this person or what can I discover? And that's me bringing that to the table. I've also wondered if I have a bad first date, does that mean that a second date would be equally as horrible? And what I'm kind of getting from you is maybe it's not.
It seems to me, I don't know, haven't you, never mind what I might think, haven't you had that experience that on the second date, all of a sudden that person became very attractive to you?
It can go both ways. Some people I thought were amazing on the first date. You kind of realize, oh, he's just hot and there's nothing else there. Or on a second date, the person might open up a little bit. Like I often say first dates are like shuttle launches and most of them end disastrously. Like, you're kind of have all this big fanfare and expectations and usually it blows up and goes sideways. And it's kind of like maybe that's just my reaction and that initial reaction isn't significant, and by significant, sounds like you're saying it's not the God's honest truth. It's just my negative reaction to something.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Sandy, thank you so much. This has been awesome. It's been really empowering. I feel more empowered around going on my first dates. I kind of got to get that reaction is just a reaction. It's just a knee-jerk thing. And then if I not let it have power over me, I can be open to discovering something new that might be miraculous. So thank you so much. For people who might be interested in learning more about you do the programs you design, you lead, you create, why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about where they can learn more?
The company that I work with is called Landmark Worldwide, and you can find out about us at landmarkworldwide.com. And our programs are designed to allow people to expand personally and professionally in ways that make a difference to the quality of their life. The various programs we offer have been independently evaluated and discovered to be the kinds of experiences that bring about a positive and permanent shifts in the quality of life. And they're offered all over the world. So I recommend people check us out on the internet, and you can find out where an office is near you that way.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much, Sandy, for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you again soon. And thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for the real service you're doing for people. It's real clear from the questions you ask and the things that you're interested in that you're out to really make a significant contribution to your community. And it's just a pleasure to be able to be with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sandy. Bye.